Maureen O'Hara entered Hollywood at a moment when cinema was learning how to see in color, and the industry quickly discovered that color behaved differently around her. With blazing red hair and piercing blue eyes, she didn't merely appear in Technicolor films, she seemed to organize them. Lighting crews adjusted their work to accommodate her presence, not out of vanity, but necessity. On screen, O'Hara projected a strength that refused to be ornamental. She did not exist to soften male heroes or decorate the edges of a story. She stood at its center, grounded and unmovable. Yet the confidence audiences saw was not born of ease. It was the result of discipline, restraint, and a deeply rooted sense of self. Hollywood admired her image, but it never fully owned her. That distance, carefully maintained, would define both her career and her survival within the system. A childhood built on discipline, not dreams born on August 17, 1920. In a suburb of Dublin, Maureen O'Hara was raised in a household where routine mattered more than fantasy. Her father, Charles Fitzsimons, valued endurance and structure, while her mother, Marguerite, trained as an operatic singer and approached the arts as discipline rather than display. Music, movement, and speech were practiced daily, not celebrated. Talent was never praised prematurely. All 6 children were encouraged to work hard without assuming distinction. This environment shaped O'Hara's understanding of effort and restraint. Art was not a path to attention, but a system of control over body and mind. There was no talk of stardom, only responsibility. That grounding would later protect her in an industry that often confused visibility with worth. From an early age, she learned how to stand firm without asking to be seen, learning the stage without illusion. By the age of 6, O'Hara began formal training in dance and drama, treated with the same seriousness as academic study. At 14, she performed with local theater groups, not as a prodigy, but as someone fulfilling an expected role through preparation. When she joined Dublin's Abbey Theatre, the environment demanded precision, stamina, and emotional restraint. Mistakes were not softened, performance was work. This early exposure removed any illusion that applause was the goal. Instead, she learned reliability. Alongside this training, her father insisted she learn practical skills like typing and bookkeeping, quietly reinforcing the idea that performance was fragile and never guaranteed. These lessons were absorbed without discussion. By the time she left for London in the late 1930s, she carried a professional mindset, shaped by discipline rather than ambition, prepared to adapt without expectation. Entering cinema without surrendering herself, London film studios introduced O'Hara to a colder, more technical world where cameras replaced audiences. Early roles offered no emotional feedback, only mechanical precision. She treated film as another environment to master, not a destiny. That changed when Charles Laughton recognized her steadiness and signed her to a long-term contract. With that decision came a name change, from Fitzsimons to O'Hara, signaling the first moment her identity was reshaped for the market. Films like Jamaica Inn and The Hunchback of Notre Dame positioned her within ambitious productions, and Technicolor quickly claimed her image. Yet with that visibility came tension. Performance slowly gave way to image management. O'Hara complied with the work, but not the surrender. She remained present while holding part of herself at a distance, a boundary that would later define her choices. John Ford and the Power of Restraint. O'Hara's collaboration with director John Ford marked a crucial shift in her craft. In How Green Was My Valley, she played a character defined not by action, but by restraint. Ford demanded emotional economy, eliminating excess and enforcing discipline. For O'Hara, this required unlearning stage habits and adapting to the camera's intimacy. The film's success cemented her reputation, even without individual awards. What mattered was the role's structural importance. She became essential without spectacle. This working method reinforced her belief that strength could exist quietly within a narrative. Ford's sets were demanding, often harsh, but they respected competence. O'Hara thrived under those conditions, where endurance mattered more than charm. These films shaped her image not as an exception, but as a necessary force within the story's architecture. Technicolor strength and physical endurance. As Technicolor matured, O'Hara's roles increasingly demanded physical commitment. Adventure films placed her in harsh conditions, exposed to heat, wind, and long shooting schedules. The beauty audiences admired was the final layer, not the foundation. Her performances relied on timing, stamina, and bodily control, skills developed long before Hollywood. In films like The Spanish Main and Sinbad the Sailor, her characters moved within the action rather than waiting on its edges. Strength was not declared, it was required for the story to function. At a time when female labor was rarely acknowledged, O'Hara's work demonstrated that endurance was not gendered. Yet this competence was often mistaken for compliance. When she refused roles that reduced her heritage or distorted her values, she was labeled difficult. The cost of saying no was invisibly enforced. Speaking up in a silent system. At the height of her career, O'Hara faced a moment that exposed Hollywood's limits. In her later memoir, she described reporting serious misconduct by a powerful industry figure. What followed was not resolution, but deflection. Attention shifted away from accountability toward her reputation. Projects slowed, opportunities narrowed, and the system applied pressure without formal exclusion. O'Hara continued working, but the ease of advancement disappeared. She did not turn her experience into spectacle, nor did she withdraw publicly. She adjusted quietly, choosing control over visibility. Decades later, her account would be reevaluated in a cultural context better equipped to understand it. At the time, it marked a boundary. She remained present, but never fully trusted the system again. Silence, for her, became a form of self-preservation rather than surrender. Partnership without transgression. O'Hara's on-screen partnership with John Wayne became one of Hollywood's most enduring collaborations. Their chemistry convinced audiences of a romance that never existed off-screen. What they shared was professional respect. Their films relied on balance, neither dominating the frame. The Quiet Man, filmed in Ireland, carried personal significance for O'Hara. Despite a serious injury on set, filming continued, reflecting the era's priorities. The film's success further solidified her image as a strong, central presence. Yet after this peak, something shifted. Offers continued, but O'Hara became selective. She no longer felt compelled to maintain momentum at any cost. When the system narrowed its tolerance for deviation, she did not fight to remain visible. Instead, she chose absence over compromise, allowing her career to contract without collapse. Choosing life beyond the frame. As major film roles diminished, O'Hara transitioned naturally into television and music. These spaces allowed work without the weight of image maintenance. Returning to Irish folk music, she performed with restraint and respect for tradition, refusing to commercialize it. Her private life followed a similar logic. After difficult early marriages, she found stability with Charles Blair, an aviator whose world operated on accountability rather than illusion. Life with him drew her away from Hollywood, not as retreat, but as choice. After his sudden death, O'Hara assumed responsibility for their shared business, navigating real-world pressures without spectacle. This period revealed a different kind of strength, one untethered from performance. Fame no longer defined her rhythm. Work continued because it needed to, not because it was watched. A legacy that did not need defense. In her later years, O'Hara lived quietly, dividing her time between family and routine. Public appearances became rare, not out of bitterness, but completion. When she received an honorary Academy Award in 2014, the recognition arrived without drama. She accepted it simply, without rewriting history. Maureen O'Hara passed away in 2015 at the age of 95. Her legacy is not one of constant ascent, but of sustained integrity. She demonstrated that women could exist at the center of cinema without apology, spectacle, or myth-making. Her strength was never framed as exception, but as function. Because of that, her work endures not as nostalgia, but as foundation. She did not remain in the light to preserve herself. She stepped away when it was no longer required.